So, Diane, I am really interested to start at the beginning. Can you tell me something about growing up, your family growing up, what it was like? I want to know how you became who you are. I want to start at the really beginning. And I see you're laughing. I would be laughing too, because that would be a very hard thing for me to do. But if you don't mind, I would love to hear that story.
Well, that's a pretty long story. But really, growing up, my parents have always been pretty independent. They've been strongly religious, and which is not always something that people embrace. And so we always had animals, horses, cows. We didn't live on a ranch, but we had lots of animals and chores and that kind of thing. Actually had a pretty good childhood, strong disciplinarian for a father, which is sometimes good, sometimes bad. Pretty independent myself, did a lot of sports, very outgoing, very energetic, loved to compete in things. Had a horse when I was growing up, which is very therapeutic in itself. Yeah. And I learned early on in my life that when a tragedy happens, I seem to just get really calm. And as I look back on things, and part of that was when you go through the CPE programs and they really strip you down and make you do the biography and all that stuff, you really go back to where may have some of this been planted. And that's when I guess I really learned that everything that I've gone through so far has brought me right to where I'm at. And I've just had a calmness and a peace anytime any tragedy has happened. And years later, you fast forward that, my husband got really sick and he was in the hospital for a long period of time. And when someone's in the hospital like that, you get to know your neighbors, right? Inside the hospital. And, just that standard visitation and just visiting with people and them encouraging you and you encouraging them. And I met the lead chaplain who started the police and fire chaplains ministry, Chaplain McQueen. I met him at that time, and he just kind of had planted the seed about what he did as a first responder chaplain. And years later, far from anything I could ever imagine, I'm now the executive director of that organization. So, but it's been a long process. But yet, as you watch the forming over the years, I think I know I'm right where I'm supposed to be.
I think that must be true, based on all I've read about you. I don't know you, but just reading it, I think it must be true. Can you talk a little bit about your journey becoming a chaplain? After you made the decision, what happened then?
Well, I started out with this. So when I met Chaplain McQueen and he kind of planted that seed, he kind of likes to baptize you just right into the organization. But I had 5 young kids at home, and it just, the timing wasn't right. But I started connecting with him and doing some of the training for law enforcement chaplaincy. In Alaska, we're the police and fire chaplains. We're a nonprofit that serves both of our police and fire departments. And that really intrigued me. And so I just started doing some of the training. And over the course of the years, I stayed in contact, took some CPE, continued to do some law enforcement and first responder training. And then it was about 2007 or 8 that my children were getting a little older, and I started embracing it more. We have a group of volunteers. Our chaplaincy is volunteers, so you do it in between times. And it just kind of got a hold of me. Some of the principles my husband and I always lived by was debt-free. And so by having those principles and living debt-free, I can do more with the chaplaincy in a volunteer capacity than, say, most others. And as it progressed, and my husband passed away last June, my kids are all raised, and I'm debt free. The executive director was retiring. And I think that through that whole process, and I've left the chaplaincy 2 or 3 times, and it's brought me right back. And so now I am the executive director, and I have that time. I have that availability. I do get a stipend as the executive director, and I don't need a lot because I live simple. Everything's free. And it goes back to some of that, the code of standards that we read, live light, owe no one.
Yes.
And I really absorb that every time I read that. And that allows me to be available and to be right where I'm supposed to be.
Tell me about Alaska. How did you get there?
So I met a roommate in college. I was going to Northwest Nazarene in Idaho there, and my roommate ended up being a gal from Anchorage, Alaska, and that just intrigued me. Like I said, I've always been an adventurer, and I was like, Alaska, sure, why not? So finished up a year in Idaho, and then I traveled up to Alaska with her. Ended up in Homer, Alaska. They have fisheries and canneries and the fishing industry. So you work all summer. A lot of people come up, make a lot of money. Fell in love with Alaska. That's actually where I had met my husband. And it just was so amazing. I decided to stay here. So
it fit who you wanted to be and how you wanted to live.
Wild and adventurous, yes.
Yeah. I would love to hear a story that kind of sticks in your mind. You know, we're living vicariously through you in this very exciting chaplain job that you have. So can you share a story with us that kind of embodies what you think of your job, something that sticks out in your mind?
Well, there's so many stories, but I know that typically, as a first responder chaplain, like I said, our mission is serving those who serve. So our ultimate mission is to be there for those that go into that front line as a resource, as a support. And I was thinking about that this morning. You know, what first responder wants to hear that wailing of someone that's grieving? They don't. And that's an emotional package that they don't need to carry. And so if we can come in alongside them and take that person who's grieving to one side and let them do what they need to do and deal with the emotional piece there, it's horrible. We become very familiar with death. Most of the time as chaplains, when we respond, it's because somebody has died. And we become very familiar with death. And so to come in and give the people that are grieving, who went from wife to widow, who went from mother to motherless of a child who has just died, is so heart-wrenching. Or a father, or a partner of 50 years, or a newlywed who just lost. That's heart-wrenching. We can't change that. We can't fix it. But when we come alongside and we meet the person at their need, religion doesn't really come in there. It doesn't matter your faith. You're grieving. So if we can come alongside you and give you some direction in those moments, our goal is to get their resources, because we're going to be leaving in a few hours, get their resources to surround them and get them in the right direction with the right people to help continue to walk them on that new journey that they're on. To me, it seems like they're just got slammed into a dark hole. If we can come alongside and for a moment shine a light and say, you're in this dark hole, head this direction, and give them a few steps to start in the direction, the journey of grieving, the journey of now their life is in a total new direction. That is what really stirs my heart. And over the years, I've had people come back to me and say, You were that bright light in that dark moment. And the first time somebody said that to me, I was standing in a funeral home, and it was a very traumatic event. Man had lost his wife and another member of the family, and everybody was trying to just fix him. And in those moments, you can't fix anything. And you have to recognize that. Just be. Don't listen. I mean, just listen, don't talk. And sometimes you just be. There's nothing to say. Can't fix it. What can you say? And he put his arm around me and he said, thank you for being that bright spot in this whole terrible thing. That touched my heart. And over the years, when people say that, it brings a tear to my eye now, because then it means that I'm effective. I'm making a difference in a horrible situation.
How are you doing? Your husband died so recently, and to plunge yourself back into, a lot of deaths and a lot of support of other folks, it's a recent loss for you. How are you holding up? How are you doing?
Well, situation with my husband, he had been sick for many years. So every day that he was around, he far outlived his human suit. I was able to, my kids and some friends, we had a little get together after he had died, and the way I explained it to everyone is he outlived his human suit. He was supposed to have died years ago, and that kind of was a different journey for me, because when my kids were little and he was so ill, as they were growing up, eventually he wasn't living in the home. So it was a different transition for us. And over the years, not that we got used to it, because you never get used to it, but we knew that every day was an additional day of gratitude. And he died June 20th of last year. And in July, I was able to go to International Conference of Police Chaplains. I attend there every year. I'm part of their organization. They're one of our governing bodies in our training. And I went from my husband's death, to that conference, and just was surrounded by long-term chaplains of 40, 50 plus years of being a chaplains that they just, embraced me with love and support. And then back home to where the group of chaplains we have here, we actually are family. We have a great team of chaplains that we're all in this together.
I was going to ask you what support you have to deal with all the emotional things you were talking about, the emotion of the loss that you deal with every time you show up. And it sounds like you are you a member of a chapter of an organization that you attend regularly?
Yes. So I'm also a member of the Cascadia chapter of CPSP, and we meet monthly. And so they've been a great support through the whole CPE process, through the board certification process. I'm a member of the Federation of Fire Chaplains and the International Conference of Police Chaplains. As I talk to our chaplains here, one of the things is do no harm. Do no harm to yourself or to others. You cannot go out and help others and harm yourself, because if we're going to alter your lifestyle and damage you, then you're not doing any good to yourself. So it's do no harm to yourself or to others. We are required to talk to somebody after every call out we have, whether it's via text or a phone call or a sit-down meeting. The longevity is very important to us. The mental health of our officers and our chaplains is very right at the heart of what we are. We're not here to damage ourselves in the process of serving someone else.
You got an award that's pretty stupendous. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So I can. Every time that award is brought up, it leaves me speechless. It's the Presidential Call to Service Award, Lifetime Achievement Award, but it's a Call to Service Award, and it's a volunteer award of serving over 4,000 hours. I'm also a member of Chaplain Fellowship Ministries, and they're one of my mentors And I try to have a lot of strong mentors in my life to make sure that I'm always accountable and always on the right path. I was at a conference recently in Texas, and I received that achievement award from President Barack Obama. It just really leaves me speechless and humbled. And I was thinking about that the last couple of days. If you actually break it down, and over the course of your lifetime, if you look at, I've been doing this on and off for 13 years, 12 to 13 years. That's about 400 hours a month for 10 years. If you look at 400 divided by 12 or even by 10, that's 40 hours a month. You divide that by 4, that's about 10 hours a week. So if you did 6 to 10 hours a week over the course of 10 years, and I'm sure many people volunteer a lot, but you don't really calculate those hours. And so when you look at it, it does add up, and it was really amazing that when they called my name as at this award ceremony, I just sat there. I heard my name. They called my name twice, and I heard it twice, and it didn't register that they're calling my name, because I'm like, who am I? I'm a chaplain from Alaska. I'm here to get more resources, and so they're like, Diane, and I look, and I'm like, oh, me? So and that was kind of an embarrassing moment for me, because I was sitting there and it didn't register. They're calling me. And I really was humbled, because it's like, who am I? I'm just here trying to make my world a little bit better in the ripple effect that I have, and support our first responders.
It's pretty amazing. I looked it up, and not many people get that award. So that is really a great honor. You didn't know you were going to get it?
No, I didn't at all. And I had asked one of the chaplains there afterwards. I said, can I ask who nominated me? Because I'm still in this kind of cloud, and their ministry in Texas had nominated me. They had, I'm accountable to many organizations, and you have to send in your hours and field reports and that kind of stuff. And they had accumulated all the documentation, not knowing, and had submitted it. So I was very in awe, and still am.
Is there a lot of danger in the job that you do? Of course, that's the first thing that came to my mind, thinking about fire and police and responding with first responders. Is the scene kind of quiet by the time you get there? I mean, not quiet in terms of the grieving, but all of the danger, or have you walked into pretty hard situations?
So as a chaplain, our law enforcement secures the scene even before fire comes on the scene, if there's anything. And our Anchorage Police Department is amazing officers. Our fire department are amazing first responders, and the scene is always secure by the time we get there. And like I said, typically we respond because somebody has died. The officers always make sure that we are safe, and we always check in with our dispatch. They know where we are at all times. So we're always in a safe environment. Doesn't mean that there's not some places that we go that we don't need our officers, but they always make sure that we are safe.
That's good to know, because it seems like an awfully dangerous job that you're in. I see you wear a collar. What, are you of a faith that you wear a collar?
So no, I have the uniform on. It's a shirt, and we wear the chaplain collar. It's the initial signal for a chaplain. We looked over the course of the years to change our uniform a little bit. And every time we do, we go back to this right here with the collar. And it's because when we go on a scene, or when I'm in the hospital, people will look over. And if you're in plain clothes and just look like somebody, they ask who you are, what are you doing, why are you here? But if they look over and they see this standard uniform with the collar on, oh, the chaplain's here. And it's a quick, the chaplain's here, and they keep moving. So we have stayed with this collar and continue to use this uniform as an identifying mark when we arrive on scenes.
That makes sense. I was wondering too, you said that you are often with people who've lost relatives or loved ones. Do you have a lot of time with the first responders themselves to support them? Is that one of the things that you have time at the scene to do, or do you do it after? Or I imagine you're pretty close to the people that you respond to.
So again, the heart of our mission is our first responders, back to those who actually respond. And while we're on a scene is not the time to engage much with them. They have a job to do, and we do not want to put a chink in our armor, as we would say, because when they leave that call, they have to go to another call. So we try to go to briefings. They have briefings before their shift. We'll stop by a firehouse, have some coffee, go to public events with them, and build that relationship so that we have those relationships in the event that something happens, that maybe they're struggling with their spouse, maybe their spouse is going to have surgery, maybe they have an injury. They just have somebody to talk to, or somebody to show up and be at the hospital and say a prayer over them before they have surgery on a shoulder or a foot, or their wife has a baby, those kind of things. So we build those relationships on the scene by being there and being of assistance, but actually just showing up and just being a presence.
How did training kind of change? You immediately responded about being a chaplain. You were called to it. You sort of felt like that was you. How did CPE training help or kind of change you? How did it work?
Well, that takes you right to the core. I'm a pretty private person and keep things really close to my chest of what goes on in my life. And that just kept peeling things back. And I remember when I was going to, you know how they do the board panels at the end. And they had done their research, I know, on me, because their first couple questions went right to my, like, ooh, somebody was checking out. And it was basically, one of the first questions they asked me is, what makes me cry? Personally and professionally. And I'm a pretty strong person, and I'll admit I don't cry much. And for that question to be one of the first questions really reminded me of the process I had gone through CPE, because it makes you look at yourself. And I've always held on to that, and I share that with our chaplains, because when you respond, you have to know yourself, and you have to know yourself well. Is there something that you're responding to that you're going to bring back to yourself that looks like my grandfather? I have a child of that age. I just had a grandchild of that age. And you need to be healed in whatever injury you have growing up or through your whole lifetime, so that you can be balanced. And so CPE continued to just crack me open, I think, as the group that I went through said, Diane, it took a long time to get that rust off them doors and then crowbars to pry it open. But once it actually got pried open, it's like, okay, was that really that hard? Yes, it was.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, it is.
Here's where I'm at now, and it is very freeing once the doors are open. So CPE, but it took a long time. I was a little bit hardened to that and resistant, I think. But when you finally realize and you surrender to what you're called to do, I wasn't sure that I was called to this. And yet I knew that when I helped people and I made a difference, that I was making a difference, and no matter what the tragedy was. And when I leave my house, I say a very similar prayer every time. You know, take me where you want me to go, because I don't know where I'm going. Sometimes I get briefed, sometimes I don't. But I just say a prayer, take me wherever you're going to take me. Let me meet whoever I'm supposed to meet. Let me be a light in whatever situation. Help me to say the right words. Help me to stay out of the way. Help me to make a difference.
I don't think you're having any problem with that at all. I think you're there. I think that prayer has been answered, and you can go on to the next prayer. I do have a question. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to. What is the thing that was most surprising to you that you learned in your CPE, getting cracked open and all of that? What did you find about yourself that was surprising?
I guess the thing that it was most surprising is that it's really not that hard to surrender where you're supposed to be and to let God or the divine being, whatever you believe in, actually have control of everything. If you take the things that you can control and do those, great. It's when you take those things you can't control and you try to control them, no matter what, you can't control them. So that just beats, it's like hitting your head against the wall. So I think that would be that surrender, because it's so hard for us to surrender. But when we do, it's so revealing, and being vulnerable. It's amazing how that will propel you further down the road.
It almost feels like you've taken your first deep breath. Like
yes.
Your shoulders relax and you take a deep breath and you think, why have I been fighting for so long?
Right. Correct.
For strong women, that's a hard place to get to sometimes.
Well, and the whole life is a journey. During this course, also taking the CPE and just trying to make sure that this is where I wanted to be and where I was supposed to be. I took a course that's called Healing the Heart, and the people that facilitated it, amazing. And one of my greatest strengths is how strong I am. But one of my greatest weaknesses is how strong I am.
Yes.
And so so the combination of CPE and this Healing the Heart program, there's different components in your life that you can look at and say, that took me down the next chapter. And Healing the Heart was one of those. And through the course of the week, they kind of strip you down a little bit and make you look at yourself. It's self-evaluation. And they do this process at the end, and each person's in the hot seat per se. And you sit in the hot seat, and I don't know. I didn't know what even was to come to my mind. What is something that still needs to be healed in my heart? And I knew the hot seat was coming and nothing was coming up. And when I sat down, it just came out. And what came out was the part about being so strong, because I always felt that I had to be strong. And then went right to the heart of me being independent and always doing things myself. Through the whole course of my life, I was strong. When my husband was sick, I was strong. Raising my kids, I was strong. I always would keep that close to myself and did a lot of that by myself. Your friends come and go. And every tragedy you have in your life, it seems that a whole different set of friends leave you and others come along the way. And God has blessed me that people have always come in my life at the right time. And at the end of that hot seat, there was a circle of about 10 or 12 of us, and they had me get on my knees, which I wasn't embarrassed at all to do. It's another surprising thing. And go to each person and look them in their eye and say, I'm sorry that I've tried to do things alone. I don't need to be strong. Will you support me? And that just really empowered me, not in embarrassment, not in weakness, but to release that and know that I don't need to be strong, because being weak does make me strong.
I think asking for help sometimes is the hardest thing you do. There's so many built-in things that stop you from asking for help.
Oh, yes. Yes. And, the team of chaplains that we have here, I learn from them every day. And I hope that they learn from me, because we're as strong as our team is, and I'm just proud of the chaplains that we have here in Alaska and around the country that we connect with, because really we're all in this together. This journey of life, nobody gets down the road by themselves, and we all do need each other.
Well, I hope you'll come to the plenary that we're having in CPSP. I know everybody'd like to meet you because they're going to be seeing this video, so you'll be a star down at the plenary as well. I hope you can come. They'll send you an invitation, and I'd love to meet you myself. And best of luck. What a really nice time talking with you. Thank you, and God keep you safe.
Well, thanks for having me, and I thank you.